So, good evening, and welcome to World History. As you know, I am Mr. Newton, and this is my home, my office here. We're going to try something a little different. It's called the Flip Class. These videos will be available to you at home, and I'm going to place them, well, I'll show you in class where I'm going to place them online. But these first couple of videos, we'll watch them in class. So, hi, Mr. Newton, standing there in the class. Hi to everybody. Yeah, I'm a goofball. I'm not going to make you guys look at me the whole time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go away. Bye. Alright, within this lecture, and we are talking about the Enlightenment, and we're pretty much going to pick up where we left off. We're going to talk about some of these people. As you can see, this is Standard 13. We're going to identify the major ideas of the Enlightenment from the writings of Locke, Voltaire, and Rousseau, and the relationship to politics and society. So, we started talking about how the scientific revolution was really a separation of church and science. We started separating and stepping away from everything being based off of religion and religion driving everything. And these guys that we've already talked about, so we talked about people like Galileo and no relation to me, Sir Isaac Newton, and people like Robert Ball and their ideas, and even William Harvey and how their ideas kind of changed all aspects of science, whether it is from how we see ourselves from an astrological aspect, that, you know, we went from geocentric to heliocentric, to looking at medicine and how we study medicine, and even mathematics. So by the time we get to the Enlightenment, and I guess I should back up and say that, you know, and the Enlightenment actually began with the Renaissance and people who started questioning who they were and looking at the whole humanism aspect and encouraging education. We get the Age of Exploration, which we talked a little bit about last term, and discovery of the new lands and different trade routes, and how this whole search for new things. And I'm just going to go back because I don't want to confuse you guys. This little intro there. These new societies coming in contact with each other, the Protestant Reformation. You know, we remember you know, Martin Luther and kind of his stand on the Catholic Church and his beliefs, and I'm not going to rehash that, but this whole toleration of other religions and just, you know, being free to explore new ideas. During the age of the absolute monarchs, you know, we talk about how they change. We really looked at, as a society, how we want to be ruled and how we kind of feel about everything. So these ideas influence science. And then the first guy we're going to talk about is Thomas Hobbes, because political ideas really, from the Enlightenment, you know, we're talking about Europe and then the influence that it has, because we're going to start talking about the Age of Revolutions, which the first one we'll talk about is the American Revolution, and then we'll talk about the French Revolution, and then we'll talk about the revolution in Central America and Latin America. And these guys are the ones that really, these are our first political thinkers. These are what the French call the philosophes, or philosophers, if you will. These philosophers like Hobbes, and we'll talk about Montesquieu, and Francois-Marie Arouet. Goes by the name of Voltaire, and we'll talk about him here shortly. But all these guys have these ideas about how we should rule ourselves. Now, Hobbes He didn't like the English Civil Wars and the chaos and everything that was going on, the beheadings, and just how we treated ourselves. We as a society have kind of always been a little cruel and even selfish, and some of these things permeate even into today's society. But as times changed, how we view cruelty and what's an acceptable level of cruelty and even selfishness has kind of changed. So Hobbes argued that people need to be protected from themselves. And I think when we look at, how we feel about ourselves and our government, even by today's standards, we feel like that we need to protect ourselves or be protected from ourselves. So what kind of government would you think that Hobbes supported? Now, this is an answer that you may be able to just easily surmise, but, he supported the absolute monarch because he felt that by having one person in charge, by basically subjugating ourselves to someone who could be that absolute power and maintain order, he felt that was the best way to, rule society because, if we could just have one true leader and everybody just sort of kind of follows, although, as you guys know, that works a little bit, but we don't need just one person. We kind of need a few more people. And his idea about this social contract is that we give up the power to the kings and they provide laws and order, but that social contract is also about us being willing to, and again I use the word subjugate, but we subjugate ourselves to each other in the belief that everybody is going to, it's not just me, Mr. Newton, saying, hey, I believe that this king is going to take care of me, but it's all of us as a group buying into this idea, not just one person. And that's one of the reasons why it works. We talked last term from the beginning of civilization all the way up to, the 1500s, and you wonder why, one person is able to be all powerful and all ruling, and why people would even follow them and some of their crazy ideas and even some of their good ideas. Well, it's this whole social contract that we have as a society to just be in agreement that this one person is the best person to make decisions for us about how we live as a group. We talked a little bit about John Locke already, and as a little aside, because I know Mr. Chrisman may be using this also as a test for his class, you guys may or may not have talked about John Locke, and hi, Mr. Chrisman's class, and Mr. Chrisman. But these, they use the term philosophe, but it's philosophers. He disagreed with the ideas of Hobbes. The one thing that we've already talked about with John Locke is the life, liberty, and property. That's what he believed, that all people had these natural rights. And it is these natural rights that when, we look at how we started governing ourselves and said, you know what, we're done with you, England. We wrote into our Bill of Rights. We wrote into our Declaration. We have the, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He wanted it, or at least his idea when he wrote the two treaties of government in 1690, he said that the people should have the power, and not only the power to overthrow the kings, but to overthrow them because they were not doing what's right. They should have this idea, or at least they had this idea that And we know that from the history we've already talked about, that there were some rulers who, if the people had the right, they would have said, okay, look, we're tired. We're ready for somebody else to make better decisions and go away. And this is why when we look at the presidency for the United States, it's awe-inspiring, because while some of you guys, and you ask the questions, well, what do you believe? Trump's a good guy, he's a bad guy. Obama was a good guy, he was a bad guy. It's everybody's right to, one, say that, we agree or disagree, but at the end, what happens every 4 years? These guys, we're able to democratically, with one voice, overthrow the government. I mean, we have that right every 4 years to overthrow the government. In all reality, we have the ability every 2 years to overthrow the government, because we do midterms and then we do every 4 years for presidency, so we can, make decisions about not only our king, if you will, although the president's not a king, but our, head of state. We can overthrow them every 4 years, and then the people who help make decisions. So I think John Locke was onto a good idea, and that's what our founding fathers believed. And so when we see, his influence on the American Declaration of Independence, he supported that limited constitutional monarchy. So he believed that the government power came from the consent of the governed, so the approval of the people. And it is the English Bill of Rights of 1689 that said that, yes, the king can be in charge, but he's got to get permission from people before he makes some of the decisions that he makes. Alrighty. So, I'm going to give you guys just a few seconds here, and we'll kind of count this down, and you can stop and pause this video if you want to, and kind of look at this writing prompt. And I'm going to then keep going. And what I would like for you guys to do is come back and look at this writing prompt and think a little bit about whose ideas are really right. What is your belief about whose ideas are right, and maybe write a paragraph about it. There's going to be a couple of different opportunities over this this little short lecture series and these videos, and either myself or, if Mr. Chrisman uses these, he can tell you which ones he wants you to do. But for right now, I just want you to kind of take a few seconds and look at it and then think about it. Alrighty, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. Alright, so let's talk about Voltaire. So he was a French philosopher, and I'll give you all of them. Interesting enough, I told you his name was Francois-Marie Arouet. It's spelled Arouet. He took the name Voltaire. This is what he said. My trade is to say what I think. And I got to say that I kind of like Voltaire because I've always been one of those people that my wife has told me, and a lot of my friends over the years have told me, man, you don't have a filter. And this guy really didn't have a filter. He said what he thought, and he argued that, we should have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. He criticized slavery. He was very outspoken. He didn't like corrupt government and slave trade and even religious prejudices. This caused him to fall out of favor not only with the French government, but with the Catholic Church. And he ends up being jailed a couple of times because of this. And eventually he is essentially exiled from France. And this is where we get our, this whole freedom of speech. So here's another writing prompt. Voltaire, there it is. I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And I think that, and you guys hear this a lot now, especially within today's society, and about what's going on with our whole political climate. I'm not going to have too deep a discussion about this, but, the whole ongoing thing about the standing for the flag, kneeling for the flag, saying the pledge, whatever. Those of you who are in my class know, because I'm a Marine, I hold something special about that whole belief system. But, and this is the thing that I have always said, none of you guys have ever asked me, but I believe exactly what Voltaire said. I believe that you have the right to say whatever you want to say, and I did pledge. I pledged and defended your right to say it. Do I agree with it? Well, some of the things you guys say I agree with, and some of them I disagree with. Do I believe you should stand for the flag because you're an American citizen? Sure. But you have that right, that freedom, and that's what it's about. So, for this writing prompt, think about, is there a time period when freedom of speech should be restricted, whether it's schools, TV, radio, wartime? Some of you guys remember probably from your U.S. and world affairs when we talk about, and as we talk about this again when we get into World War I and World War II, about some of the things that the American government did in order to kind of stifle the things that people said in order to kind of get this whole total war effort. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. But think about freedom of speech and maybe take on this, do you agree? But if you agree or disagree, tell us. Don't just say, I agree and that's it. Actually support, your argument. Make this argument, but support your argument. Alrighty, so I think that we will pick up with Baron de Montesquieu in the next one. We're about 17 minutes into this video, and I don't want to bore you guys to tears in this first video, and we'll try to make this a little exercise in how we want to balance this out. So again, I will just say that I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got something out of it. Make sure you take notes, and take notes that work for you, whether it's doing mind maps or we call them graphic organizers, and we've done some in my class, and you guys, write people's names and things like that. If your Cornell notes work for you, but take some notes from this. Maybe look at some of these writing prompts. I know you guys don't like writing, but take a little time and maybe just put some ideas down. You don't have to write a full paragraph or whatever, but pick one and just make an argument. Make that decision and get in, really kind of get involved with it. So when we talk about this stuff in class, you will, one, have a better understanding, and it'll make it easier for you to get those ideas out. So hope you enjoyed it. And this is the first in a series of, I don't know how many, because I don't know how long we're going to do this. But I hope you enjoyed it. And good morning, good evening, and good night.